I want to talk about this thing because this is a thing that people argue about all the time. So Ali Ismarovich came out with a video sort of explaining like, yes, I did multi-account in these certain ways and cheat in these certain ways, and I didn't in these other ways. And I kind of want to come back and play again at some point. And like, I'm sorry, but like, this is absurd in some ways. And it's just like, I basically tweeted like, hey, I mean, good of coming clean, but you don't get to decide you just want to come back because you feel like you just want to come back. Like, you're lost. You stole hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars from the community. You don't just get to be like, I'm sorry, and I'll see you out there. Like, that's not how it works. You know what I mean? The thing is, when these sort of discussions come up, it always goes back to Justin Bonomo. It's frustrating. And I've seen Phil Galfond sort of phrase what I say sort of in quick quips to people when I talk about it in a much more thought out and thorough way. And I think it's worth bringing up because I just really agree with him. Justin Bonomo, 17 years ago or so, multi-accounted. But it was a very different time in online poker. So the first thing to notice is that there wasn't a bunch of tournaments to play, and there wasn't a bunch of high stakes to play. The tournaments in 2005 and 2006 were like 1,000 and 2,000 person fields where the buy-ins were $100 and $200. And so online poker was really new. There wasn't sort of norms in place of what you could do and what you couldn't do. The grinders at the time wanted to figure out how to play more tournaments. Their solution was, so I'll enter multiple times in this tournament, which was not okay. But their intent was not like, I'm going to gain an edge by figuring out, like blocker removal, right? Like, I'm going to figure out extra cards in the player pool, or I'm like going to chip dump to myself or anything like that. The point was I want to play more volume. And then also online poker didn't have these norms established in 2006. It was like kind of a joke, and it developed into something that was very real. So anyways, this happened from Justin Bonomo when he was about 18 years old. He got found out and he apologized and he got banned for a short time, and then he got let back on. And now he's like one of the most, if not the most winning tournament player in the world. I don't know if he's top the money leaderboard or what. And so they just kind of incessantly bring up this event 17 years ago and drag his name through the mud and liken every form of cheating to what happened to him, what he did 17 years ago. And it's ridiculous. Anyways, Phil Galfond tweeted about this, and I really like what he said. So someone asked, serious question here, if we can't as a community forgive Ali, why are we forgiving Bonomo? See this question a lot. What Justin Bonomo did 17 years ago was nothing like what Jake and Ali did. This is true even if he'd done it in 2023, but when accounting for the landscape, it's like your grandpa being sexist in the 60s versus you committing sexual assault today. I mean, I think this comparison, although like a weird analogy, is exactly true. One, this action was a little bit of the time, and that doesn't make it right, but it was a very different time in that it isn't held to the same standard, and there also wasn't the knowledge that we have today. I have hesitated to comment because nobody likes people who stand up to cheaters, because I don't particularly feel like launching into research and a long thought out post. And because it wasn't a good thing that he did, it's not good that your grandpa was sexist. But I've seen this so many times, and those who weren't around poker back then and or don't know the details misunderstand what happened. This is exactly how I feel about it. For those who just see the word cheater when they see Justin's name, don't know anything beyond that, here's my recollection. My view is that young Justin and others thought they found a way to multi-enter tournaments before multi-entry existed so that they could play more volume. There's not as many tournaments running online as today, so some high-stakes MTTs saw it as an opportunity to get more volume in the $100 and $200 buy-in tournaments, which, by the way, were the only big tournaments going on at the time. There's no intent to card share or collude with other accounts in the large field tournaments, and in fact, Justin actively tried to make sure he couldn't do this. Again, not saying this was good, but his intent was to get more volume in without gaining an unfair advantage. Yes, being able to multi-enter when others can't is an advantage. You know what? As I write this, I know it still won't land with many because they weren't around back then when online poker was so new. Let me just say there was a lot of things that we understand today that we didn't in the early 2000s, and community discussions and consensus didn't happen at the same rate it does now. True. The point is, Justin didn't believe he was doing something bad at the time. Even though Ali is relatively young, like Justin was, he knew what he was doing was extremely wrong. He knew that he was colluding with up to half the accounts at the same table, gained an unfair advantage and unbeatable edge. This is tantamount to theft, which is obvious even back in 2006. If you want to judge Justin for what he did back then that's your right. But I'm tired of seeing Justin's acceptance back into the poker community used in the same sentence as people who aren't anywhere close to deserving of it. I agree. From my limited info, none of the other players on GG, even those who were banned, were on the level of Jake and Ali, who were truly robbing the games. So here is some perspective from some people. How do you know with certainty what Justin's intent was? You can't from Get 'em. Tony Dunce, very well said. I'm similarly tired of people claiming what Z Justin did. It's equivalent to more recent cheating scandals. As you pointed out, the do's and don'ts of online poker were much less established 05, 06. Exactly, yeah. Well written, Phil, totally agree. From Craig Tapscott, yeah. What about Bonomo then is often an egregious false equivalency. I agree with Kane. Callus. Tom Dewan, basically agree with this. Thought of writing something similar myself. Yes to the points. Huge note to your grandpa metaphor. Very fair. Yeah, so I think the grandpa metaphor is interesting. Your grandpa being sexist in the 60s versus you committing sexual assault today is the comparison. Jen Shahadi saying no to the grandpa metaphor. Like, to me, when I read this at first, I think it depends what you mean by this. Grandpa being sexist. As in, like, having some sexist ideas or taking sexist actions. Like, what does this mean? There's a big question. You don't have to use this metaphor. You know, it's kind of a loaded metaphor for sure. But I guess, like, I don't take as much issue with it. But I'm giving Galfond the benefit of the doubt. Whereas if you don't give him the benefit of the doubt, you could find problems with this, I would say, for sure. But to add some context, when this happened, I didn't play tournaments, but I literally didn't know it wasn't allowed. I also had 2-party accounts that were both registered to my real name, all the same details. So, I mean, Ike Haxton didn't even know it wasn't allowed. So, like, this is great that so many, like, legends of the game that were playing 0506, which I was not, are, like, chiming in with their perspective on this stuff, right? And then you have a bunch of people that disagree, and I think they're wrong. They both stole money, plain and simple. I mean, people that just, like, summarize life as plain and simple, we just don't see things the same way. This is also true. You have nothing to gain from standing up for me. You're almost certainly going to get some very negative reactions for it. This is true, right? Like, Phil Galfond has free-rolled himself in this spot again. I just agree with Phil Galfond all the time. I'm looking forward to the opportunity when I don't, but, like, I can only think of one example where I didn't. I even agree with Ryan Fee, dude. It's so rare that I agree with Ryan Fee on Twitter, but he said it was a completely different world back then. Hard to describe unless you were there. And I just agree.